Fans of Steve Jackson games, nuclear artillery shells, and rampaging cyber tanks, thank you very much for joining me for an out-of-the-pack review of quite a different sort of model to what I normally cover on my channel, although something that I hope you will find interesting. And what we're looking at today is a miniature from 21 years ago, certainly in terms of when it was sold, and its origins go back even further than that. And this is from the game Ogre, which, as you probably guessed from the intro, is by Steve Jackson Games. And what we're going to look at today is this model here, which is the Ogre Mark V cyber tank. So for those of you who don't know what Ogre is a micro-scale armour game set in the near future, which you can play on either a hex-based map or normal terrain. And it's, let's say, it's kind of definitive feature of these cyber tanks, enormous mobile fortresses which form a central part of warfare in a technologically different paradigm to what we know today. So yes, here we have it. This is the Ogre Mark V. This is the signature Ogre, you might say, of the game franchise. It was originally featured in art in the first ever game that was released in 1977 or 78. We'll have a little picture of that artwork now. And it's carried on to the present, and this game is still going. It's kind of probably more of a North American thing, but it is still going today. There's recently been a Kickstarter in the last few years which introduced Ogre 6th edition with plastic miniatures. But today we're going to look at this metal model, which I think is probably the best from a collector's point of view. So this is brand new. For 21 years old, it's in pretty good nick. Got a little bit of wear and tear around the box. So overall though, it's in very good condition. So what we're going to do in this video is I'm going to take you around the box, we're going to open it up, and we're going to have a look at the miniature inside as well, and just see what this was all about 21 years ago, back in the year 2000, when Steve Jackson Games released Deluxe Ogre and a new and rejuvenated range of models to go with it. There we go, that's the plan. So first thing about the front, well, you get a picture of the model, general bump. It says Origins Award game winner. Ogres have won a number of awards over the years. The next thing we see is we have Combine Set 1. So there are two main warring protagonists, or factions we could say, in the Ogre universe, which is set in near future Earth, but in a very different timeline. So there is a Combine, which is a successor state to the modern day United States of America. And then there is the Pan-Europeans, which is a, well, as you probably imagine, a giant empire that spans across much of a European landmass. And there are a number of these miniature sets produced, and I've got a few more of these that we might do videos on in the future as well. And the other thing that tells you straight away on the front of the pack is 150 points. So it lets you know how big a contribution this particular set adds to your army. So we've got a bit of bump. Printed in the USA. I think these are made in the USA as well. Combine Set 1 Ogre Miniatures. That is the faction badge, this sort of hourglass for the Combine. And then a bit more bump as well. And the familiar sign of the Illuminati that Steve Jackson uses for his miniatures company. Interesting observation. So Combine set, the name the Combine, this goes way back into the late 70s. I can't help but wonder that the makers of Half-Life 2 may have paid a nod to the game Ogre in naming the alien faction the Combine. Who knows? Maybe it was a coincidence, but it's an interesting little thought, isn't it? Now on the back, we have quite a bit of stuff. There's a little bit of background to this particular model, so if you like the bump, have a pause and have a read. We also get a picture of the assembled model. We get some spare parts with this miniature, and then also, rather usefully, we get the actual playing card for using the Ogre Mark V in games of Ogre. And you know, people familiar with this game will recognise all the key attributes of the Ogre cyber tank: the main battery, secondary battery, missiles, anti-personnel, and then the tread boxes. And all these represent the offensive and defensive capabilities and characteristics of the Ogre. So very fine set. And this one, as it says here, you get the repair kit. And this is basically a spare set of parts. So you get spare main battery, spare secondary battery, spare mast, and somewhat in the style of Peter Benchley's Jaws, almost a Ogre main mast cutting through the water when the cyber tank is submerged. So a nice little extra there. I think this is something probably like a deluxe miniature set with all those spares. They wouldn't normally include those. Now the packaging, really unusual and interesting packaging. Well, maybe not unusual, but interesting. So we have a sleeve. So we take the sleeve off like so. And then we have this black shiny box. Now for those of you who were around when I was younger, you will recognise this as being a VHS plastic outer cover case, so VHS video cassette. And what Steve Jackson did is they bought up some of these, produced them in black plastic and used them as transport containers like so. So quite a neat little solution there for packaging and transport. And so let's now go in and have a look. So we get a couple of sheets of foam, and then we have the actual miniature components laid out as so. Let's set this down, and then we'll get them out one at a time, and we'll just see what we're like. This is long out of production, this set, so I'm not really going to look at the quality in the same way I would do in a normal review. But nonetheless, I will also make a few comments around how well it's being cast. So first thing about this is completely lead-free pewter. So it's got that distinctive feel to this type of white metal. The design style of Ogres is very distinctive. It's somewhat minimalist at the same time as having all these interesting shapes and features. And the idea of these Ogres is they're not supposed to look anything like a modern tank per se, because the technology base they're built from is so far removed from anything we have today conceptually. It's led to a complete paradigm shift in how vehicles look, and particularly these cyber tanks. And they're supposed to be somewhat alien, let's say, in appearance, because they are controlled by robotic intelligence. There is some cleanup to do around the model. Not too bad though. And overall, I mean, the cast is very nice. It's been turned out very well. You can see that the molds were heated up properly before these were cast. It does feel rather well done. And you can see there some information about this miniature. And interesting, it says 1992. So although this was from the 2000 release, these models were of an earlier generation, as it says 1992. I believe there are a number of waves of Ogre miniatures. I think there was some in 87. And I think they might have involved Parda. I've only read a little bit about this. So perhaps if someone's listening and you know the history of this model in terms of who sculpted it, was it modified later, please do share that in the comments section. But anyway, so that is a forward hull. And we can see we've got the main battery mounts here, which are two enormous nuclear artillery shell cannons. These recesses on the back are for the secondary batteries, which are smaller caliber nuclear artillery cannons. And then we can see these smaller little circular features, and these are the point defense railguns. So when we say point defense railguns, they are automatic 30mm railguns as described in at least one piece of history I saw. So the firepower depicted in these things is insane. And the reason that they had nuclear artillery shells was because of armor technology. Biphase carbide armor. It can resist nuclear impacts. Quite remarkable. So that's a front hull. Now let's do the rear hull section. And we see some more features repeated. I mean, we have a whole battery of anti-personnel railguns at the back. We have the upper deck with maybe some cooling vents for the fusion reactor that powers this thing. And then we have 6 large missiles in pods mounted along the rear. And these are, as you probably guessed, are tactical nukes with some punch. And then the way this model goes together is there's no underside detail as such here, but they connect together like that. When I build this, I'm not quite sure how I'll deal with this. If I just leave it like that, I may put a magnet on to hold it together neatly. I might even put a little bit of background detail in with some modelling putty around the joint to make it look like there's some cables there or something. But yeah, so that's a front. It's looking quite small down there. A note there on the scale of Ogre miniatures. So these are made at 1/285th scale. which is approximately 6mm. So it's about the same scale miniatures as Battletech. Although the maps, the scale is much smaller than Battletech. If I remember rightly on the maps, each hex, which is probably about that size, is 1500 meters. Much more space to maneuver in a game than with Battletech, out of weapon range. Right, what else do we have? Well, we have 4 tread units. And the way these are described is some sort of independent motive system linked to the fusion reactor, and each individual roller has around 3000 horsepower. A cutaway poster of an Ogre Mark V, and that's how it's described. So it's quite interesting that they went into such specific details. There's a fair bit of cleanup to do around these. Not too much. And then these are actually going to connect into these 2 holes on the underside, like so. So we can probably approximate a little bit of how this will look when it's done. It's a fairly big miniature, this. Well, relatively large. I mean, it's not huge. Still micro-armour, but for the scale, it's quite large. Let's see if we can get it all lined up and laid out. That'd be quite nice. So there you are. Roughly speaking, that's what the Ogre will look like when it's built. So, other bits. Let's look at the weapons. We have 2 sets of 2 main artillery or main battery barrels. As I said, they gave you spares in this because it's the deluxe set, so it was in case you lose some. I don't anticipate that being an issue. I think that once these are assembled, they're probably not going to break and be lost. But it's nice to have, and particularly as a number of these components are compatible with other Ogre cyber tank models, so they could be used on others if you lose parts. Next we have 4 sets of secondary battery guns. And these are the weapons that give the Ogre its somewhat characteristic hedgehog stroke porcupine type appearance, with these barrels sticking in the air, as we can see here, and particularly on this silhouette. So yeah, quite a distinctive part of the image of the Ogre cyber tank are the tall spines, shall we say, of the secondary batteries. There are other cyber tanks. There's 6 different Ogre miniatures, at least. I think there may be even more. One of them was actually hiding just up there, if you've not already spotted it. That's an Ogre Mark III. And then there are a couple of pan-European only Ogre designs, i.e. the Fencer. I've actually got one of those to do a video on in the future. We then got the main mast. I suppose is representative of a communication array. Maybe a sensor tower. Maybe got a little bit of filling to do here to get it smooth. It's got a slight depression in the flank of it there, but not too hard to sort that out. And that will sit on there like that, but it won't balance at the moment. That one's a little bit wonky, so that'll need straightening out. And then the final component in the Ogre Mark V set is this here. And this just made me giggle so much when I first saw it. And as I said, this is somewhat reminiscent of the great white shark's dorsal fin cutting through the water if the Ogre cyber tank is submerged. Interestingly, the date on that is 2000. This must have been in addition to this kit, which was originally designed in '93. So there you have it, a bit of a blast from the past there. The Ogre Mark V cyber tank metal miniature from Steve Jackson Games, released in 2000 to coincide with the deluxe Ogre edition set, but the origins of the model going back to 1992 at least. I hope you found this an interesting exploration of an old and somewhat unusual model that you may not have seen before. I might do some more video content if you're interested on Ogre miniatures, because I've got quite a few to cover. So if you are interested in seeing that, do say so in the comments. Also, if you have memories, collections of Ogre miniatures, or any observations on the game system, please do share them in the comment section. As always, I'll be very interested to hear. But other than that, I'd just like to say thank you very much for watching. I'll speak to you next time, and goodbye.